I am so excited to be here today. First of all, I would like to thank each and every one of you for your service. And then I want to ask you a question. How many of you are excited about getting just a little bit healthier and advancing evidence-based practice? Okay, great. Even if you're not excited, could you please act excited for me? Because when we act excited, pretty soon we feel excited. And just like stress is contagious, so is enthusiasm. Another question. How many of you have tried to change the behavior of somebody you love? We all have, right? Whether it's squeeze the toothpaste differently, put the toilet seat down, get more physically active. But what do we know about behavior change? Is it easy? No. Most people don't change behavior unless what happens? Crisis. Or their emotions are raised. So we would like to believe that every clinician throughout the United States engages consistently in evidence-based practice. But we know that is far from reality. We estimate today that only about 30 to 40% of nurses, physicians, other healthcare providers consistently implement evidence-based care. So I was the first Chief Wellness Officer position at Ohio State and at a university in the country. I left sunny Arizona 7 years ago to come to Buckeye Nation. And everybody says, why in the Sam Hill would you leave sunny Arizona? It was for that position, to spearhead population health and well-being all throughout this huge, big university. And I'm going to share a little bit about our outcomes. But I think every university, every academic medical center in this country needs a chief wellness officer. I grew up in that little town of Republic, Pennsylvania, about an hour southwest of Pittsburgh. Coal mining town, population about 1,000 people. I lived in a half of a little house. My father was a coal miner. We were probably labeled working poor. But I was a happy kid. I grew up with rose-colored glasses on. I still can make lemonade out of lemons any day. And that characteristic came in super handy when I was 15 years of age. I was home alone with my mom. She made a big breakfast, laughed and joked around. I started walking up the stairs to take a shower. My mom sits down on our couch to pay bills. So as I'm walking up the stairs, my mom sneezed, and I said, "Bless you, Mom," and she didn't answer me. I said, "Bless you, Mom." She didn't answer me. I thought that was odd. I walked back down the stairs to find her already unconscious with her head back on the couch. And I shook her, Mom, what's wrong? She fell over and she died right in front of me from a hemorrhagic stroke. Now, I suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder for quite some time. Couldn't sleep at night, wasn't eating well, really couldn't concentrate in school. And after 3 months of these symptoms, my family member took me to my family physician and said, please do something to help Bern. So he did what so many providers still do in 2018. Got out his prescription pad, wrote a script for Valium, said, give Bern one of these. Every night she'll sleep and be just fine. You see, there was no counseling for me in my little town of Republic, Pennsylvania. And sadly today, 1 out of 4 to 5 children, teens, and college students have a mental health problem, yet less than 25% get any treatment. And if they get treatment, it is often not gold standard, evidence-based cognitive behavior therapy. I'm not saying medication is not warranted. It is for severe depression and if CBT is not working. So in the next 4 years, I lost my mom suddenly. I lost a cousin who was like a brother to me following a car accident. The year after that, I lost the only grandparent I ever knew and loved. And at the age of 19, my dad had his heart attack. That's a lot for a teenager. But you know the story. What doesn't break us only makes us stronger. And as a result of what I went through as an adolescent, I became passionate to become a nurse, then a pediatric nurse practitioner, and a psychiatric nurse practitioner. Go on to get my PhD so that I could develop and test CBT-based interventions that could be manualized and delivered to children, teens, and college youth suffering from depression and anxiety. And I'm so psyched to be able to stand up here as a researcher and tell you today that CBT program is now being used in 41 states throughout the country, and providers are getting reimbursed for it to bring help to so many who wouldn't receive evidence-based treatment otherwise. My mom had a history of headaches for over a year, and my dad kept saying, would you go to the doctor, please, figure out what's wrong? She went to our family physician 1 week before she died. Diagnosis, high blood pressure. Given a prescription for a blood pressure medication that my dad found in her purse after she died. So you wonder, why am I such a fanatic about wellness and evidence-based practice? It truly stems back to my years as an adolescent. So everybody's talking about the quadruple aim. And that aim, if people could figure out how do we get there, we would be in so much better shape. How do we improve the patient experience? How do we improve population health? How do we decrease costs? And the fourth aim now that everybody is focused on, you in the service, on readiness. In the civilian world, how do we get clinicians to be healthier? Because burnout is now affecting more than 50% of physicians and nurses in the United States. Over 50%. How many of you want to be cared for by a burnt-out provider? Because we know clinicians who are not in good mental and physical health commit more medical errors. And sadly, in this country, 400,000 people die every single year from preventable medical errors. Many of those errors due to poor physical and mental health of clinicians. So I don't know if you remember this study that came out in 2012. I'll never forget where I was when I saw the media on this story. And I said, no, this can't be. Nurses have got to be healthier than physicians. But what this Gallup poll showed, nurses had 3 times the rates of obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, and depression as clinicians. So last year, I got a team together from the American Academy of Nursing. We have a Million Hearts Committee. We're very focused on the prevention of heart attacks and strokes. And we said, let's get an updated state of health in nurses across the United States. So we did this study. Over 2,300 nurses from 19 healthcare systems throughout the United States. And here's what we found. More than 50% reported poor physical and mental health. More than 50%. 25% were depressed. This was the first study to show depression was the leading cause of medical errors. And nurses who were in suboptimal physical and mental health, which was over 50% of the sample, made more medical errors. The other thing our study showed that so many studies have also found, the longer the shift work, the poorer the health, and the more medical errors that are made. We must do what's right based on best evidence. Best evidence shows we need to eliminate 12-hour shifts, not only for our nurses, but for healthcare quality and patient safety. So a year and a half ago, the National Academy of Medicine said clinician burnout, depression, suicide is a major public health epidemic. So the National Academy of Medicine launched an action collaborative on clinician well-being and resilience. I'm blessed to serve as one of about 55 leaders on this action collaborative representing nursing. We have a wonderful knowledge hub posted on this website with a lot of great evidence for both clinicians, leaders, and healthcare systems. What we don't want to say to clinicians is this is your fault, because a lot of clinician burnout is due to problems within the healthcare system and culture. Think about the electronic medical record. As a result of character builders with the electronic medical record and other system issues, providers are only spending 25% of their time with patients. So we have to be accountable. We have to make sure we prioritize our own self-care, but we also have to come up with solutions to healthcare system issues that are really causing burnout in our clinicians. Last week, I, along with 3 physicians who are chief wellness officers, we published this urgent call to action in Health Affairs saying we've got to have more chief wellness officers in our healthcare systems who sit at high-level positions with budget and authority to really create change and cultures of well-being. So if you ask me today, what's the #1 cause of death in America? As a nurse practitioner, I would have to tell you technically it's cardiac disease. However, if we take into consideration all causes of death and disease in our country, it's behaviors. Behaviors are our #1 killer. Physical inactivity, unhealthy eating, smoking. Look at our opioid epidemic that we have in this country. And lastly, beware of your chair. Now, I don't know about all of you in the service. Does anybody here sit 3 hours on average a day? Can you put up your hand? Okay, look at that. The majority of you are sitting 3 hours a day. Do you know studies support if we sit 3 hours a day, we are increasing our cardiac risk by 30%. If we sit 5 or more a day, research studies have shown that's comparable on our bodies to smoking 1 1/4 packs of cigarettes a day. That is research-based, and that is regardless of whether you exercise. The recommended 5 days a week, 30 minutes a day. Sitting is truthfully killing the American people. So we have to sit less, stand more, get more standing desks, take more recovery breaks. I don't do 1-hour meetings anymore, and I suggest you follow suit. Do 50-minute meetings and save 10 minutes for recovery. Stand up, get up, and move. It's critical. So you all are in wonderful shape from looking at this audience. But I understand you also have issues with behaviors at times and need to stay motivated. Well, I want you to think about your own lifestyle behaviors right now? And are you prioritizing your own self-care? If you're not, who can you do a little better for? I have 2 new grandsons. I want to be around to see them grow up. So to do that, when I don't feel like exercising and I don't feel like eating healthy, I put those little faces in front of me. So as you watch this clip, let it be a motivator for you to choose one healthy lifestyle behavior today that you're going to get just a little bit better at.
What will your last 10 years look like? Will you be quick enough for a game of tag with your grandchild? Strong enough to embrace every moment? Will you grow old with vitality? Or get old with disease? It's time to decide.
That's a pretty powerful clip that I'm actually encouraging my nurse practitioner students when they're seeing patients to try and move them a little bit from pre-contemplation to contemplation to start acting on one healthy lifestyle behavior. So I didn't fabricate this slide. This is a real fitness facility in the state of California, and you have a choice. You can walk the stairs, or you could take the escalator to go work out at the gym. Well, a group of psychologists wanted to study this for a week. How many people on average a day would take the steps to go work out? What they found, 2 people a day. How many times do we drive around a parking lot looking for the closest place to park instead of, let me park further away so I get my 10,000 steps in a day? So if I had to give every person in America an evidence-based formula for how they can cut their risk of chronic disease by those figures. This is based on research. Here's what I would tell everybody to do. Engage in physical activity, 30 minutes, 5 days a week. Doesn't have to be 30 minutes at the gym. Could be 6 5-minute movement breaks a day. 5 fruits and vegetables. The average American eats 2.5. Don't smoke. And everybody gets happy when I share that last one. If you drink alcohol, drink it in moderation. So what does that mean? The CDC tells us 1 drink a day if you're a woman, 2 a day if you're a man. But everybody asks me, Bern, how big can that drink be? And I always tell them not the size of the alcoholic beverages that you get in Las Vegas, right? But look at this frightening statistic. 6% of Americans only are needing these. 6%. 1 out of 2 people in our country have a chronic condition. 1 out of 4 have multiple chronic conditions. Usually the second comorbid condition is a mental health issue. So if we don't assess, if we don't thoroughly treat the mental health piece, we don't stand a prayer at getting people better physically. But again, behavior change, even for ourselves, is not easy. So please have your students write prescriptions for physical activity, daily stress reduction, sleep 7 hours a night. These things, because if we got everybody to do these things, we could eliminate 80% of chronic disease in this country. But we are still a sick care healthcare system. We really are. And we need to change that to a well care system. Even at end of life, how do we help people live to their optimal well-being at end of life? Well, you heard my story. I have bad cardiac genes, don't I? And I could say, I'm going to eat what I want to eat, I'm not going to exercise because I'm going to die young anyway. But research with 1 million people showed us more than our genes, more than our social circumstances, more than the health care we receive. It's our behaviors that are going to largely determine if we die young or not. So one of the last things I'm going to share about wellness, and now I'm moving to evidence-based practice, is make today your January 1. And I'm not kidding you. Don't wait till January 1 to decide. You're going to get a little better at just one lifestyle behavior. Do it today. Write it down. Put it where you brush your teeth every day, because studies show if we write our goals down and we look at them every day, we're much likely to achieve those goals. So that takes us to evidence-based practice. Evidence-based practice truly equals the quadruple aim in healthcare. EBP is not something we do on top of everything else that we do. It should be the foundation from which we practice every single day. It's a problem-solving approach to the way we deliver care that integrates the best evidence from well-designed studies, combines that with our clinical expertise, should have the patient's preferences feed into that. Because when all three of those elements integrate, we make the best clinical decisions that lead to the best patient outcomes. However, I could do the best job of preparing my students across all levels to go out and deliver evidence-based care. But if they move into a unit, a hospital, a healthcare system where the environment, the culture isn't like that, they're going to slip back into that's the way we do it here. That's the way Dr. So-and-so says it needs to be done. It's just like wellness. You want to encourage people to have healthy behaviors, just like EBP. We got to create cultures that make these behaviors the default choice so that it's easy for people to engage in EBP. It's easy for them to engage in healthy choices and behaviors. So I was passionate about evidence-based practice when I really started pushing this movement in nursing back in the late 90s, when I was still in Rochester, New York. I became even more passionate about evidence-based practice when my husband and I almost lost our youngest daughter, Kaylin, in Australia due to non-evidence-based healthcare. I wish I had an hour just to walk you through what we experienced there. Kaylin almost died of a ruptured appendix. Here I was, a pediatric nurse practitioner. I knew what she was suffering from within hours that she developed it. I tried to communicate that to the docs over in Australia. Nobody would listen to me. So we end up in the outback in Australia, in the bush, where there's nothing, where she spiked 104.5 fever. And I said to my husband, we blew it. I knew it. She had appendicitis, it ruptured, that's why the pain subsided, and now we're into a terrible abscess. We gotta get out of the outback. So we flew to Cairns, Australia. We took her right in. She had a 33,000 white blood cell count, a 92% neutrophilia, a 36% stabs. And they told me it was viral and we could take her back to the hotel and keep a good eye on her. She had a surgeon, I'm not kidding you, who had her jumping up and down on her right foot in the emergency room, saying when a child can do this, they don't have an abdominal issue going on. They labeled me a stressed out nurse mom from the United States. They finally admitted her because I was insistent. I cried and begged for an ultrasound of her abdomen, which they would not do. 18 hours later, after admission, my daughter was in full-blown peritonitis, pelvic sepsis, bacteremic, and developing septicemia. So I was begging for an ultrasound. They finally did one, which showed the large abscess in her belly. Then it got worse. Then a surgeon came in, and he says, your daughter is way too ill to operate. We've got to get her to intensive care. What we're going to do, start her on triple high IV dose antibiotics, run that for 6 weeks in hopes the body will roll off the abscess, and then we'll go in and do elective surgery. I was sobbing. Thank God for the pediatric nurse caring for our daughter, Debbie Sweetum. I'll never forget her in my entire life because she saved my daughter. She said, Bern, we have socialized medicine over here, and as an American, you have a right to get a second opinion. I said, Debbie, please get me the best surgeon in town. Ella DeCostas comes in, takes one look at Kaylin and said, if we don't get your daughter to OR immediately, we're going to lose her. We've got to get this infection out of her. They took her to OR. They flushed her peritoneum because it was full of pus for over 2 solid hours. Now, my daughter, thankfully, lived after a critical care hospitalization, but she could have easily died. And if I wasn't the advocate that I was, with the knowledge that I had, she would have died. If I didn't have that nurse, she would have died. Every patient in America needs us as advocates for them. And that's not always easy. That takes courage when everybody else is telling you, no, it's just whatever. Well, Kaylin, now we don't know for sure. She just got married. It's doubtful she'll be able to have children naturally because all the damage that was done to her fallopian tubes, because it was 10 days from start to when she was operated on. But Kaylin's in her 4th year of vet school now at Ohio State. And she always says, Mom, if I had to go through what I went through so you could help people to advance evidence-based practice all throughout the world, then it was worth it. So she's got a wonderful resiliency about her as well. Everywhere I go, people ask me, Vern, how much evidence do we need to change practice? When do we change it? And I tell everybody, strength or level of evidence, we know level 1 evidence is systematic reviews of randomized controlled trials, then level 2. So level of evidence plus quality gives us confidence to ask. A lot of people take the word of the evidence-based recommendations and guidelines put out by national organizations. But I need to tell everybody here, a lot of those recommendations aren't done with rigorous review. So that's why critical appraisal of evidence and those skills are really important for our clinicians. We don't have to argue about this anymore. We know when we receive evidence-based healthcare, our outcomes are at least 28 to 30% better. But this time lag between the generation of evidence and its implementation in practice, it's 17 years if you're lucky. If you're lucky. I will say there are so few nurse researchers in the country. Some that were blessed enough to be funded by NIH, like myself. But a lot of those studies never get put into practice to improve outcomes. That's why I do research. It's not just to do research and to publish it and present it, but it's so that it makes a difference, that it changes practice, that it improves outcomes for children, teens, college students, and their families. Now, whether we like it or not, we live in a cost-driven healthcare system. For those of you that are researchers out there, or those of you that are doing evidence-based quality improvement projects, I would really ask you to make sure you're measuring what I call hard, so what outcomes. We are still measuring way too many warm and fuzzy variables in nursing research. We've got to measure things the healthcare system really is concerned about today, because they'll be more likely then to translate those things into practice if we can show our interventions really make a difference. We need more cost outcomes in our studies. We need more NDNQI, core performance metrics, measured in our studies, because that will truly speed translation. I had to learn that the hard way. I'm very thankful to NINR because they funded me to conduct a full-scale randomized controlled trial, testing my COPE intervention with parents of preterm babies. Now, I had several studies before this one that showed when parents of critically ill children or preterm babies got this COPE intervention, their babies did better. The kids did better in terms of developmental and mental health outcomes. The parents had less stress, less post-traumatic stress disorder, less depression. But after 25 years and all those studies, not one hospital in the country was implementing this program until I showed a so what outcome. In this clinical trial that was funded by NINR, we found preemies of parents who got COPE went home 4 days sooner, 8 days sooner if this baby was under 32 weeks. What do you think happened when I published the cost-effectiveness analysis on this so what outcome? My phone rang off, the hook, burn. I want to implement COPE in our NICU. Can you come and train our nurses to deliver it? But if I wouldn't have had that so what outcome, I would still be out banging the drum, trying to get people to adopt this program. So it's kind of crazy, but other things like this that have no evidence behind them are getting implemented. I don't know if you saw this. It was featured on either 2020 or 60 Minutes last year. A surgeon's doing this procedure for weight loss. So he's sewing a nubby little plastic patch to the anterior of the tongue. He was interviewed on national TV. The reporter said to him, "What evidence do you have behind this procedure?" He said, "I've got anecdotal evidence, it's working." The reporter said, "Well, how does it work?" He said on national TV, "It's like a behavioral modification tool. It creates so much pain to swallow anything but liquid. That's it for 30 days. This costs $2,000 to have this procedure done." What's the definition of insanity? This is it. It's it. So, we know EBP equals the quadruple aim. We know the 7 steps. When I teach our residents or our nurses or our pharmacists this 7-step process, I don't change it up based on their discipline. This is a perfect area for interprofessional education and practice because we teach all the same steps. And we teach when you have enough high quality evidence, you got to make the change now. Not take 2 years to work through bureaucracy and all the committees in a healthcare system to make the change. When you don't have enough evidence, you go to a PhD prepared person and say, we need to generate more evidence here because we don't have enough to guide practice. So in 2012, our team published this study, The State of Evidence-Based Practice in Nurses Throughout the United States. We randomly sampled nurses from the American Nurses Association. What we found was disheartening. The older the nurse, the more years in practice, the less they were interested in gaining the knowledge and skills. Now think about this fact. What's the average age of a nurse in the United States? 47. They didn't grow up with evidence-based practice. So they're seeing this as something they gotta learn on top of an already pressured schedule. And then you have faculty, well-meaning PhD prepared researchers, and I'm one of those people, but I'm also a practice person. But a lot of PhD researchers didn't grow up with evidence-based practice. So they're still teaching our students in baccalaureate and master's programs and even DNP programs the rigorous process of how to conduct research instead of how do I use it? How do I translate it into clinical care to improve outcomes? So in this study, we asked, what's the one thing that prevents you from implementing EBP? Those first four, classic, time. I don't have time. That's because the way we still teach it. If people come and learn the efficient way to do this, they no longer see time as a barrier. But the one thing we found that hadn't showed up anywhere before was number 5, manager and leader resistance. Managers, leaders who aren't supporting this, aren't walking the talk. So when Elsevier read our study, they contacted me and said, Bern, we got to get to the root of this. Could you consult with us and do a study of chief nurse execs all throughout the country to further dig in to why this is such an issue? So we did that, and we published this study 2 years ago. We did a study with 273 chief nurses all throughout the United States. And here's what we found. These chief nurses told us, Bern, we believe in evidence-based practice. It's a really good thing to do, but their own implementation of evidence-based practice was really quite poor. In fact, over half of these chief nurses admitted we don't know how to measure outcomes of the care that's being delivered in our healthcare system. And then almost 80% of them said we don't have a critical mass of nurses who have these evidence-based practice skills. And then we went on to ask them, what are your top priorities as a chief nurse? It's not surprising. Number 1 and 2, quality and safety. But look where evidence-based practice fell. To the bottom. So we had the biggest aha moment. We said, holy mackerel, there's a huge disconnect here. They want quality and safety, but they don't recognize evidence-based practice is the direct path to get them to quality and safety. So it wasn't surprising that the core performance metrics and NDNQI metrics of so many of the hospitals were not at benchmark. So we never had competencies for practicing nurses and advanced practice nurses. So I said to our team, we've got to develop a set of research-based competencies so that when nurses enter hospitals and the healthcare systems. Within the first week, the chief nurse or the directors could say, we have an EBP culture here, and we expect you by the end of your first year of time with us to be meeting these competencies. But we're going to help you to get there. We're going to provide you with the education and skills building that you need to have so you do this consistently. If you have not seen these competencies, I'd encourage you to download them from the Worldview's website. So last year, I said, okay, now we've got the competencies. So now we have to assess the state of competency in U.S. nurses. So we did a study, over 2,000 nurses from 19 healthcare systems across the country. Disappointing, especially when you've been banging the drum for this for 20 years. I was hopeful that by 2020, this would be in the DNA of every practicing clinician in the country. But look what we found. Of all 24 competencies, nurses who were master's prepared only reported meeting one, questioning clinical practice, not all the rest. Look at the little difference between associate degree nurses' competence and baccalaureate prepared individuals. So I'm still an optimist. So I look at this data and I say, we have a lot of opportunity to get better that is in front of us. And Magnet was not happy to hear our findings because we looked at, did nurses not in Magnet designated institutions versus those who did, were they more competent? We found very little difference, and we're writing that paper up for publication now. What we did find, culture, knowledge, beliefs, and mentorship were key to competency. We did a structural equation model, and we're also writing this paper up now that shows you culture for evidence-based practice is driving everything. So it gets back to culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We've got to build cultures that support people to practice in this way as the default. We've got to develop more mentors who work with point-of-care clinicians on their EBP skills. Because as we see in this model, having a mentor really leads to intent to stay, and also competency leads to implementation. Culture leads to satisfaction. So it explains and it really supports our ARC model for evidence-based practice. So now that we have the competencies, just like other types of research, we have to use them. And we've got to create cultures of best practice. But the only person who likes change are babies with wet diapers, is what I always say. Change is not easy to implement, but we can't give up because healthcare quality, safety, our patients' outcomes depend on it. So these are all the important pieces of culture in a system. You've got to have your leaders, your directors, your managers who have the skills, who role model this. You've got to have the infrastructure, and you've got to recognize people for doing this. So we've done now about 7 studies that support the relationship in our ARC model for system-wide change to quality healthcare. And as you can see in this model, having a critical mass of evidence-based practice mentors is key to implementation. We've got to cultivate these critical masses of mentors who are spread throughout the entire system, working with point-of-care clinicians. Well, we've implemented this model now in several healthcare systems throughout the country with the same great outcomes, better cost outcomes, which is why CEOs keep bringing us back, because we're able to show them the tremendous cost outcomes that are produced with EBP. We are working now with Memorial Sloan Kettering out of New York. The chief nurse brought us in there and said, Bern, I want to develop hundreds of mentors for EBP all throughout our system. So we've developed over 300 EBP mentors at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and this will show you, look how great those mentors are meeting the competencies compared to the other nurses in the national study. So you really do need a multi-component strategy. And you can't just educate without the skill building and the integration into clinical courses. You gotta dream big, you gotta believe in the dream, and you gotta persist. I always say success is going from one failure to the next with enthusiasm. You just got to dream big, believe, and act. I'm biased because I edit worldviews, but I truly believe if you want a great resource that really covers so much at EBP, how to translate research into practice to improve outcomes, please see this journal. So lastly, I had the pleasure of meeting Mark Spitz once. Do you remember who he was? He was famous before Michael Phelps came along and stole more gold medals, right? But he said to me, do you think it got me all excited to wake up at 4 a.m., 5 days a week, go to a cold swimming pool, swim 4 to 5 hours of laps, practicing for the Olympics? He said, Bern, that didn't excite me. What excited me was as I swam, I didn't see that black line on the bottom of the pool anymore. All I saw was my dream of getting up on the Olympic platform and getting a gold medal around my neck. See, sadly, we have a lot of clinicians who are practicing burnt out and in a coma of complacency because they haven't been able to affect change. And then there's a lot of people out there who's lost sight of their dreams. So they're not excited to wake up on a Monday morning and go to work because they're misaligned with their dreams and their passions. I'm so tired of hearing people say, Bern, why do nurses eat their young? Why do they eat their young? We must stop eating our young. We must nourish them with big dreams. We must support them to achieve them. So my last charge for all of you is this. If I could be your fairy godmother and give you any dream or wish you could accomplish in the next 2, 5, 10 years, what will you do if you absolutely know you cannot fail? And when you go back to take care of your patients, what's the smallest change that you can make based on best evidence to improve their outcomes? We've got to get rid of this saying, that's the way we've always done it. We've got to do what's right based on best evidence. We've got to dream big and eat one bite of the bundle of healthy carrots at a time. If you are not plugged in, it took me 10 years of yearly trips to the Helene Fold Health Trust out of New York City. And after 10 years of pitching a dream for a National Institute for Evidence-Based Practice, the trustee finally looked at me after 10 years and said, "Bern, how much would you need to launch this?" And I looked at the largest gift they ever gave, which was $6 million. And I said, $6.5 million. And she said, "Bern, I think we can do it." And last year, we got $6.5 million to launch this institute. We offer such great programming. There's all types of resources on this Fold website. And then, very excitingly, this month, we are launching the first credential in evidence-based practice in the country. We have all these certifications, med-surg, nurse educator, we never had one for evidence-based practice, but we will now. So that is super, super exciting. So if I could motivate you, I'm going to end by this little girl who can do a great job. But I hope that you will continue to, and I just messed that up. I hope you will continue to, let's see how good I am with technology here, to advance both evidence-based practice and wellness, and not let people who think you can't do something take your dreams away.
Do it! Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday you said tomorrow. So just do it! Make your dreams come true. Just do it! Some people dream of success, and you're going to wake up and we're going to work hard at it. Nothing is impossible. You should get to a point where anyone else will quit. And you're not going to stop there. No, what are you waiting for? Just do it. Just do it. Yes, you can. Just do it.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.